Some stories begin in castles. Some begin in mansions. But this story begins under a bridge. It is the story of Tom, a man who lost everything, his home, his family, and his hope, but never lost his art. With only a box of broken paintbrushes and the sound of the city as his music, he painted what others couldn't see. Dreams hidden in dirt, beauty inside sorrow, and light in places where no light seemed to live. He never imagined his paintings would one day travel farther than his footsteps ever had. He never thought the same hands that once begged for food would be asked to create something for the most powerful man in the country. But life has a strange way of painting its own masterpiece, one stroke of fate at a time. And this is the journey of the homeless artist who painted a president's portrait. The night was cold, and the city streets glowed with soft yellow lights. A man named Tom sat under a bridge, holding a small box of old paintbrushes. His clothes were torn, and his hands were rough from the cold. But when he opened that little box, his world changed. Inside it were colors that made him feel alive again. Every time he painted, it was like the wind whispered stories only he could hear. Tom used old cardboard, walls, and even trash lids as his canvas. He painted faces of strangers, birds flying over the city, and children smiling. But no one ever stopped to look. People passed by like shadows. They didn't see the beauty in his brokenness. Until one morning, a little girl named Lucy stopped in front of him. She held a cup of hot chocolate and said softly, "Your paintings look like dreams." Tom smiled for the first time in weeks. That small smile carried something, a light that had almost died. Lucy came every day after school. She brought him paper, pencils, and sometimes leftover food. She would sit beside him and ask, "Why do you paint?" He would answer, "Because it's the only way I remember who I am." Days passed, and Lucy's father, Mr. Brown, noticed she was spending time under the bridge. One evening, he followed her and saw Tom painting. He was shocked. The man's drawings were not just good, they were extraordinary. He saw emotion, depth, and truth in every line. "You did this?" he asked. Tom nodded shyly. Mr. Brown was a gallery worker. He invited Tom to show his art at a local exhibition. At first, Tom refused. He didn't think anyone would care. But Lucy begged him to try. "You always tell me to believe in color," she said. "Now you must believe in yourself." Tom finally agreed. He washed his face, borrowed a shirt, and walked into a new world, the world of art and light. The gallery was bright and full of people wearing shiny clothes. Tom stood in a corner, feeling small. His heart beat fast. He thought of the bridge, the cold nights, and how far he had come. When the lights dimmed, Mr. Brown introduced him. "This is Tom, the artist who paints with his heart." Everyone turned to look. At first, they whispered. Then they began to walk closer to his paintings. Faces softened. Eyes widened. Some people even cried. There was silence, the kind that meant something deep had touched them. One woman whispered, "He paints pain like it's poetry." That night, people bought every single one of his paintings. Tom was speechless. He couldn't believe that the same hands that once begged for bread were now creating art worth thousands of dollars. Mr. Brown hugged him and said, "The world finally sees what I saw." But that was only the beginning. Weeks later, Tom moved into a small studio apartment. For the first time in years, he had a bed, a table, and a window with light. He painted every day, faces, skies, hope. But one evening, there was a knock on his door. A tall man in a black suit stood outside. "Good evening, Mr. Tom," he said with a serious voice. "The president's office would like to meet you." Tom froze. He thought it was a mistake. "Me? Why would the president want me?" The man smiled slightly. "Because he saw your painting at the National Art Show. He said it reminded him of something personal." Tom's hands trembled. Could this really be happening? The black car took him through wide city roads to a grand building with white pillars. Tom's heart pounded with every turn. When they arrived, he was guided through marble halls filled with portraits of great men and women. He felt small again, but this time, in awe, not fear. Inside the grand room sat President Carter, a kind-faced man with silver hair. "Tom," he said warmly, "your art speaks to the soul. I saw one of your paintings. It looked like my late mother. You painted her eyes exactly as I remember." Tom's voice shook. I never knew who she was. I just painted from my heart." The president smiled. "That's why I want you to paint my portrait. Not because of fame, But because you see beyond faces, you paint truth. Tom could barely breathe. A homeless man asked to paint a president. It sounded like a dream too big to be real. But it was real, and his life was about to change forever. Tom couldn't sleep that night. He sat by the window of his small studio, watching the city lights blink like tiny stars. His heart was full of joy, but also fear. He whispered to himself, "A president's portrait? Me." He remembered his life under the bridge, the hunger, the rain, and the loneliness. How could the same man who once begged for coins now stand before a president? His thoughts spun in circles until dawn. The next morning, he walked to the art supply store. The owner, an old lady named Mrs. White, smiled when she saw him. "Tom, I saw you on the news. You're famous now." He laughed shyly. "Famous is too big a word. I'm just lucky." She helped him pick the best brushes and colors. "Use your heart, Tom," she said. "It's what made people fall in love with your art." When he returned home, he stood before the blank canvas. It was bigger than any he had ever used. He touched it gently. "You and I," he whispered to it, "we're going to do something special." The day of the first meeting with the president came. Tom wore a simple white shirt and carried his sketchbook. Inside the grand office, the president smiled again. "Call me John," he said. "I don't want this to feel official. Just two men telling a story through paint." Tom nodded, still nervous. As he studied John's face, he noticed the sadness in his eyes, a kind of quiet pain hidden behind power. "You look like you carry the world on your shoulders," Tom said softly. John chuckled. "Maybe I do. But you, my friend, carry stories in your colors." For hours, Tom asked questions about John's childhood, his dreams, and what made him laugh. He wanted to know the soul behind the man. That night, he drew the first sketch, a humble man, smiling with tired eyes. When John saw it, he was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "That's me. Not the president, just me." Tom smiled. "That's who I wanted to find." Days turned into weeks. Tom visited the president often, sketching, painting, and talking. They shared stories of struggle, Tom's years on the streets, and John's hard journey through politics. They became friends in a quiet, honest way. But one afternoon, a man in a dark suit approached Tom after a session. "Mr. Tom," he said coldly, "not everyone thinks it's wise for the president to work with a former homeless man." Tom's heart sank. "What do you mean?" The man crossed his arms. "The media might dig into your past. Some may not like what they find. The president has an image to protect." Tom didn't sleep that night. He sat beside his half-finished painting, staring at the colors that now looked dull. Was he a mistake? Would they take this chance away from him? The next morning, he packed his brushes. Maybe it was time to disappear again. But as he opened the door, someone stood there, President John himself. "You weren't at the session," John said gently. "I didn't want to cause trouble," Tom murmured. John smiled sadly. "Tom, you're not trouble. You're a reminder that no one is too broken to create something beautiful." Tom returned to his canvas with renewed strength. He painted not just John's face, but his heart, the weight of power, the hope in his smile, and the kindness hidden behind duty. Each brushstroke was alive, carrying pieces of both their souls. One evening, as Tom worked late, Lucy came to visit him. She had grown taller, her eyes bright with pride. "You did it, Tom. You're painting the president." Tom laughed. "You started it, Lucy. You believed when I couldn't." She handed him a small photo, a picture of him painting under the bridge years ago. "Don't ever forget where you began," she said. Tom stared at the photo for a long time. Then he taped it beside the canvas. It reminded him that even the darkest places could lead to light. The final brushstroke was done on a rainy night. Thunder rolled outside as Tom stepped back from the painting. His eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a story of pain, hope, and transformation. When the president saw it the next morning, he was silent. Then he whispered, "This isn't just my portrait. It's every person who ever believed they weren't enough." Tom's hands trembled. "It's your truth," he said. "And mine too." The painting was later unveiled at a grand ceremony. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and Tom stood under the bright lights, his heart racing. He looked up and whispered to himself, "From the streets to the stars, who would have thought?" But deep inside, he knew this was not the end. A storm was still waiting, one that would test everything he had built. After the portrait ceremony, Tom became a name everyone wanted to know. Newspapers called him the miracle artist. Children drew pictures of him in school. He received letters from people who said his story gave them hope. But fame felt strange to Tom. He missed quiet mornings under bridges, the whisper of the wind, and the sound of trains passing in the distance. One evening, as he sat by his window painting the sunset, there was a knock on his door. It was a woman holding a folder. "Mr. Tom," she said, "we're making a film about your life. The president wants your story to inspire others." Tom smiled gently. If it will help people believe in second chances, then yes. He didn't want glory. He wanted meaning. The movie made people cry. The world saw not just his art, but the broken man behind it. The man who once painted on trash lids and slept in the rain. People began leaving art supplies near homeless shelters, with notes that said, "For the next Tom." The president called him one evening. "Tom," he said, "your painting now hangs in the Hall of Honor." Every day, people stopped to look, and some even pray in front of it. Tom's eyes filled with tears. "I just painted what I felt," he said. John's voice softened. "And what you felt healed people." Months later, Tom started a small art school for street children. He called it the Bridge of Colors, a name born from the place he once called home. The first student to join was a boy who could not speak, but loved to draw. When Tom saw the boy's sketch, he smiled. "You remind me of me," he whispered. He taught them not just to paint, but to see, to look beyond faces, beyond clothes, beyond mistakes. Art, he told them, is not what you see with your eyes. It's what you feel with your heart. One morning, the president visited the school quietly, without guards or cameras. The children gasped when they saw him. Tom ran forward and hugged him. "You came." John laughed. "I wanted to see where greatness begins." He walked around, admiring the paintings. Then he stopped before one, a simple picture of a bridge painted by the boy who couldn't speak. The president smiled. "This," he said softly, "is hope." Tom nodded. "That's what we all need." Years passed. Tom grew older, his hair turning white, his hands shaking from time. Yet, he never stopped painting. His studio was filled with colors, laughter, and life. People came from faraway countries to learn from him. But every night, before going to bed, he still whispered the same prayer. "Thank you for Lucy, for John, for the bridge, for the colors." One evening, the sky turned golden as the sun dipped behind the city. Tom stood by the window, holding his last brush. Lucy, now grown and running the art school, entered the room quietly. "Tom," she said softly, "the president sent a letter." Tom smiled weakly. "Read it to me." She opened the letter and began. "Dear Tom, the day you painted my portrait, you painted something greater than my face. You painted the power of redemption. You reminded the world that beauty can rise from brokenness. Thank you for seeing me when I was unseen, and for helping the world see itself again. Your friend always, John." Tears rolled down Lucy's cheeks as she finished. Tom closed his eyes and whispered, "Then my work is done." That night, he sat before a blank canvas one last time. He dipped his brush into blue and yellow, mixing them until they became gold. "For the bridge," he murmured, painting gentle strokes. "For hope, for love." As dawn arrived, the painting was finished, a bridge stretching from darkness into light. Tom leaned back, smiling softly, as sunlight filled the room. It was the most peaceful smile anyone had ever seen. When Lucy came in later that morning, he was gone, his brush still in his hand, his masterpiece glowing under the golden sun. At his funeral, thousands came, children, artists, leaders, and strangers. The president stood before the crowd and said, "Tom taught us that greatness doesn't come from where you start, but from how much you give." The crowd fell silent as Lucy unveiled Tom's final painting, the Bridge of Light, the same one he painted the night before he passed. And as the sun broke through the clouds, shining on the painting, everyone felt the same thing Tom once did when he first touched a brush: hope. Years later, the art school still stood, walls covered with drawings from children all over the world. A plaque by the door read, "In memory of Tom, the man who painted truth and built bridges with color." Every child who walked through that door carried a piece of his light inside them. Because once upon a time, a homeless artist painted not just a president, but the heart of humanity itself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can bring you more heartwarming and powerful stories that inspire and uplift every day.